Welcome, zombie fans, to this week's episode of Reanimated. We are on episode 109. I am AJ Conrad, here with my intrepid co-host, as always, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
Hello. This episode, like all of our episodes, is brought to you by our good friends at Squarespace. The all-in-one platform makes it easy to create your own website. You can customize it. You can make it look awesome. If you're a first-time user, they've given us a code, ZOMBIE, which is not case-sensitive. Throw that into the offer code piece of it, and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So thanks again, Squarespace, for your support. Today we are talking about sort of, departing again from our usual zombie fare. We are talking about episodes 3 and 4 of Outcast, which is the new Kirkman project, starring Patrick Fugit and others. But I'm waiting to hear what you think, Stuart, but I will reserve my comments for our review portion. But ahead of that, we have a few tidbits of news and one piece which I am very excited about. But let's get to the others first. One is a snippet from Days Gone, which is an upcoming video game. And this is Sony, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be platform exclusive to the
Yeah.
PlayStation, which is a big bummer because, well, mostly because I don't own a PlayStation. I like the looks of this game. I think it looks pretty badass. It looks like it's hard to tell exactly, and I haven't read too much into it, but it looks like it's an open world survival in a zombie apocalypse type game, story driven, but quite not non-linear, I guess, based on the trailer that we're going to be linking in the show notes that shows about 10 minutes of gameplay.
Yeah, but there's some pretty cool parts. I mean, just even in like sort of minute details where you just run into stuff and it reacts, and the quality of like the world that they've built looks pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean that was this is a probably a pretty, I don't know, staged demo where you might
Yeah.
be getting more interactivity in this area than you would in other parts of the world. But I also like the way that the mob of zombies moved and reacted and went under and around and over obstacles. It was,
Right. It isn't just sort of a static one motion movement. It looks varied, which is kind of cool.
yeah, and this is early, like an early reveal from E3 that was a week or two ago, and so you can expect to see stuff in presentations from that show that actually don't make it into the game. It's an unfortunate side effect of
Yeah.
the hype machine of gaming, but it's still, it's fun to dream. And anyway, if it's only going to PlayStation, there's a good chance I'll never get to play this game, but unless they port it to the to PC at some point.
It's kind of interesting because I kind of feel like the one platform gaming system is antiquated at this point.
I feel like
And
Xbox doesn't do it anymore, at least not that I've
yeah,
picked
and
up.
and I think that actually makes the most sense in terms of a business and trying to get, followers of your game out there. And it's interesting that they've chosen to make this platform specific. I mean, I'm not really surprised because they kind of have kept doing that, but I just feel like to get the audience and following that you want, you have to make it much more widely available to everybody.
That
So
would
that's
be my
just
thinking too. But when I looked at the outcome of E3, there were about six exclusive Sony games, PlayStation games, and I don't think I saw any Xbox.
right.
So
Well, we'll see what happens with that. Up next, making its way through the news, was a, a zombie dog that somebody spotted in a cemetery. And there was a couple of, oddly enough, like in the world of Brexit and all of the other crazy things going on, this had like a couple of follow-up articles. But, this was in New Hampshire, and basically a photo that the New Hampshire Police Department posted was of an animal running through the cemetery. Everybody was calling it like chupacabra, zombie dog. I think ultimately they think it may be a mangy fox or something like that. But I just thought it was interesting that it got as much play as it did. Slow news cycle week, I guess.
yeah, well, yeah, it makes it into USA Today. You've made the big time. Somebody
Yeah.
get that fox a wig.
Yep. And quite smartly, the officials said, the Fish and Game department recommends staying away from it. So yeah, that's probably good. Makes good sense. No matter what it is. So let it go out and roam alone.
How do you not pet that thing? You know, you got to
No,
get up
I
there
know.
and just feel the. I don't know what is that, velvet?
I don't know. And lastly, the piece that I am very excited about, a trailer for the it's the not the girl. Well, it is the girl with all the gifts, but I thought they were going to call it something else.
Yeah, they were going to call it "She Who Brings Gifts." I wonder.
Has it
That
perhaps changed? I don't know.
changed back again. Interesting.
But the trailer looks really good. I have to say, sort of, the idea in my head of the different characters matches up, at least for me. I think it looks really beautiful, and I'm pretty excited to see this.
Yeah, I think the imagery of the school of the military compound looked really good, and the short scenes that we saw with the kids interacting with their teacher looked just like I would have pictured them in
Yeah.
my head. So
And then Glenn Close has a couple of little parts in it, which she plays Dr. Caldwell, and she feels like what I thought that doctor was going to feel like just that portrayal of the doctor. And I think, at least from this, it seems like they've been pretty true to the story. Wouldn't you agree? At
well,
least
with the exception
small.
of the junkers
Well,
aren't in
right.
it, so it's gonna be interesting to see how they do the base getting overrun with and who Melanie is attacking. They show her attacking a soldier in the
Right.
trailer, so there was no infighting as I recall in the book. Like the military was fighting the junkers, and
Right, but I don't know that. Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe the take they're on it is that they're not sure who to fight, but we'll see.
yeah, that's one of the things we'll have to see. Like that'll be a surprise to us who've read the book, and that's cool. Keep it fresh.
Yep, but that looks pretty good. It's coming out in late September, September 23rd. So I'm sure we will do some follow up as it leads up to that, and I am sure more trailers will be released. But this initial trailer, great. I think anybody who's read the book and even those who have not should just check it out and start getting excited.
Just start right now.
Yes,
If you
start
if you
your
weren't
excitement.
if you weren't already, right?
Yeah, exactly. So ready to jump into our review of today?
Yeah, totes. So episodes 3 and 4 of Outcast, All Alone Now, directed by Howard Deutsch, written by Chris Black, aired on June 17th, and A Wrath Unseen, directed by Julius Ramsey, and written by Robert the Bob Kirkman, June 24th. So, who's Julius Ramsey? Do we know this person?
I'm not sure who Julius Ramsey is. Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't. His IMDb is fairly light on details. Actually, no, he's done a bunch of
No, he's
Battlestar
Walking
Galactica.
Dead.
Okay, Walking Dead, Alias, Bachelorette. That probably came in handy.
Yeah. And apparently he directed Still, which was season 4 of The Walking Dead. So that's kind of interesting.
Still.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, still. That's the one where where Daryl finds a still, right?
Right.
Yeah. All alone now.
All alone now. The cold open here is pretty. I think if you've watched any bit of this, you kind of get where it's going. The cold open shows this group of people bowling, and one of them, Blake, is exhibiting some pretty. I think we now see them as sort of what would you call them? Possession symptoms.
I guess he's obviously an outlier, but yeah, I mean, to the innocent eye, he's just having like a migraine, or you don't know what's wrong with him. He's sweating, and then he's saying terrible things. But
Well, from the outside, people just think he's like, they're like, oh, you have the flu or whatever. But he's saying some pretty horrible things. But to us, as the audience who've been watching this, I think it's pretty clear that something's going on with
yeah,
him.
clearly we are expecting everybody in this show to become a demon at some point.
Yeah, to be a demon. you know.
Um, do
One
you
of
think
the
Americans have an innate fear of bowling alley mechanisms?
maybe because they
Because the
does
very
it.
first few scenes of like the stuff that put the pins down,
Uh
they're
huh.
all like jagged and it's actually really cool the way they
It
shoot
is
it.
cool. Um, it reminded me, even though that movie was terrible, but it reminded me a little bit of Constantine. Like they have this whole bowling alley piece too, so
Yeah.
maybe it's a thing.
There's an episode of the X-Files where they
Oh,
like
you're
there's a
right.
bowling alley
No, you're
that's like
totally right. Yeah.
that's haunted by ghosts, or there's a guy who's a medium who can see ghosts in a bowling alley. Anyway, yeah, so it's just it's something I've been seeing lately. It's a little weird.
Right. One thing that and this I noticed, and I think that they do a good job of it, but some of the suspense and building of the suspense and fear in this series, and I think that this is true of a lot of horror films. It isn't just what you see; it's what you don't see or what your mind fills in. And I feel like the the part in this where you see Blake being taken full possession, or what you assume is full possession by the demon.
On the couch.
Yep.
Hmm.
And then, you sort of see half things, or they imply certain things with the scenery. So Blake goes back. He's with his business partner and good friend and his wife. And, they have a couple little jokey comments where he's just like, saying, oh, I always wanted your wife and whatever. And that quickly turns into something very different once the demon takes possession of him.
I think they're cops is actually the
Are they cops? Is that what
yeah,
it is?
because he talks about being on the precinct league.
Okay. It wasn't totally clear to me, so thanks for that. So they're partners, and once and the whole premise of this, where we see the demon taking over, he's saying that he maybe has the flu, he can't shake the flu, so his partner goes out to get him like ginger ale and stuff like that, while the wife is left at home to nurse him, to make tea, whatever, and she's left alone with him when he takes full possession.
Hmm.
But a lot of this, the implication, you see sort of her go to make the tea, and then you see him out of the corner of your eye, and it's super spooky.
Where he just like stands up off the couch.
Yeah,
That's a great shot.
it's a great shot, and then and then he of course what's coming, and he attacks her, and but a lot of the brutality happens off screen and is
Thankfully.
implied.
Yeah. Although you do see
Thankfully.
the results of it later, which is
Later, but I also think that was an interesting choice. So you're kind of left. We only see what happens, at least in the beginning, from the reaction of his partner. So his
yeah.
partner comes home and sees what, of course, is horrible. You don't even necessarily, you can guess what happens, but you don't know what happens until later. So I just thought that was they use it very well here. They definitely are masters of building that up. It's not, I mean, again, as you know, I have to, these are tough things for me to watch. This is like at least there were no children in this one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, clearly it's a tough one to watch, but you've also got Lee Tergesen, who's playing Blake Morrow, who's a great actor and,
yeah, he's
and has done
fantastic.
work in Oz. A lot of great actors came out of that show, which I think so many people haven't seen it, but it was a good show, even though it was super disturbing. Oz, he was in Generation Kill, and very recently he was General Ram Tack in the last season of Defiance. And he's done a whole buttload of other stuff on TV.
But he's a great character actor, and I thought that the casting of this show is fantastic in my opinion. And the actors really play off of each other pretty well. So there is that.
There's a few different. This is one of the main story. This is, I guess, the main storyline because this is the possession that. This is almost like the monster of the week. This is the possession that Kyle and the Reverend are gonna try and
Right.
go after this episode. But then we've got a couple of other plots that are going along parallel, such as Mark Holter deciding he wants to process the scene out at the cabin.
Which is like, who would volunteer to process that alone? I wouldn't. It's terrifying.
Backing up a little bit meta and looking at both of these episodes, Mark Holter, his character, as I had hoped, is really developing
Yeah.
over the course of these two episodes. I mean, in this one, in 3, in All Alone Now, he basically is just out there like doing dirt work in a
But
possession
what's really funny
cabin.
is that he's really excited to do it, and I liked how the chief was very just like, all right, well, if you want to go out there and use your what did he call it? His
Your
like
community college
community college knowledge or something like that of scene processing. Go for it. Like he's very
is dismissive.
yeah.
And honestly, it kind of made me wonder if Giles was a is a bad guy because he does seem to be completely disinterested in that cabin as anything. And Horton, is it Horton? Holton.
Hol-
Mark. Let's call him Mark.
Holder.
Holder. He's like, "Hey, why aren't you interested in this? The thing was full of blood and it was totally sketchy looking." So, it made me question whether or not the chief was on the up and up. But that question basically gets answered in the next episode. So
Right. And it's more of a matter of him wanting to possibly shelter other people or handle things himself, which is kind of what I was guessing and hoping for. I was really hoping he wasn't going to be a bad guy.
yeah,
Also within this, because we see a little bit more of Mark, there is an additional storyline in here between Megan, Mark, and then this person that comes in from out of town, Donnie, who, you don't initially know what it is. In fact, when this first, Megan first starts like having these weird little moments, I was concerned that she was becoming possessed as well. I don't know if you had that feeling.
Oh no, I mean no, I didn't.
She starts seeing things move a little bit quickly and jointily. She's like, her car stalls, like she's like kind of spacing out, and we've seen a little bit of this in other people. So I was like, oh no, is this where they're going with it? So, alas, it was only some PTSD going on. Or with relief, it was only PTSD. So we've got that happening. And I also feel like we see a little bit more of the relationship between Kyle and the Reverend in this, and how I was kind of expecting the Reverend to be not like sort of teaching Kyle the ropes and giving more information. But I feel like in this episode, it becomes very clear that the Reverend actually doesn't really know what he's talking about. And we saw a little bit of that with the kid, and the Reverend's like, oh, every exorcism is different and that kind of thing. And in this, just in terms of how the Reverend interacts with Blake, he's just kind of to me, it's just he's kind of going in there. He has a mission, but he doesn't know exactly how to accomplish that mission. And he doesn't appear to be entirely effective at accomplishing that mission.
Yeah, and he's really quick to give up on it too.
Yeah, which is weird because at one moment he's saying, "No, you can't give up. We have to save this soul," and the next moment he's just walking away. And it's, Kyle also doesn't know as much about it, but he does know certain things that are effective or certain reactions, and he wants answers. So his motivation is definitely there, even though it is potentially opening him up to the evil that's in Blake. So, I did find it, so basically the Reverend and Kyle go to this prison, and we see, I don't know, we see them go in with their sort of accoutrement of exorcism. And do you think that the guards would actually let them go in with that stuff?
Well, his partner had arranged for it, right? He said that he had like traded his career to try and fix Blake. So I assume that he's just cashing in all, every chip he has left.
And the partner is Luke. And what I think is interesting about this is that it's Luke really who gives them the warning. He says, look, he can get under your skin. He can play games with you. Be careful. Mm-hmm. And watch your back, basically. And he seems to have a lot more of a hold on what is going on here than the Reverend does, or at least within this episode. Did you feel that too? It was kind of interesting.
He does seem to be really familiar, with Blake's MO by this point, because it's been quite a while, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't Blake say at some point how long it's been? I mean, Luke's grown a beard, so I think it's been months or years.
Right, and he's on death row or something akin to that. Like he's obviously, and we now in this scenario find out that Luke's wife was totally just mutilated and killed, and we see flashbacks of that, and it's pretty awful.
Yeah, she's like folded up in weird ways. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was brutal.
yeah. So I'm pretty glad we didn't have to see that. So
This storyline gets resolved in a really weird way where like it's unresolved, which actually
well,
makes me think that they'll be bringing Turgison back to play
yeah,
his
I think they
character
will.
more. And they poor Kyle can't get any information out of any of these demons who are all talking to him. The weird thing is that Blake didn't recognize him immediately, whereas the others have. It
Well,
took
I think that that's to delineate the differences between maybe the possessions and the demons, and I think they're creating, or at least to me, it appears they're creating the mythology around this world.
yeah,
So basically, there's demons that come in and take possession, and it seems like they don't have too much control, so they do crazy things like bash heads against the walls, and they may have some autonomy in terms of like, or some control in terms of what they're doing, but then there's clearly others that have a lot more control, and I'm going to put the Brent Spiner character into that category.
yep,
I'm putting Blake into that category to some extent. I mean, yes, he was out of control when he killed his best friend's wife, but clearly in the prison he is toying with Kyle and the Reverend. He is capable of coming up with a plan, with playing games, and talking. Even though he's crazy pants, he's still talking in a way that confuses them and makes them second guess themselves, as it like, is this guy actually possessed, or is he just this run-of-the-mill evil guy?
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
that that's what it's building. And, did he not recognize Kyle, or is he still playing the game? Because he does definitely seem totally manipulative and terrifying.
Yeah, yeah, it's a well written everything that he says once he's possessed and beforehand.
Yeah.
Like Turgison manages to make us realize that he's like a nice guy with like two or three lines of unpossessed
Yeah,
dialogue, and then everything he says after that is just pure evil
Evil.
and pure manipulation.
Right.
It's a little bit. It's kind of disheartening to me that they finish and they like go through the whole bloody exorcism Kyle style again, and it doesn't
No
have
effect.
it doesn't, I mean, doesn't have no effect. His touch still hurts Blake, but yeah, by the end he comes to the same conclusion as the Reverend. He's like, no, nothing, that demon's in there to stay.
Well,
And
because he takes some of his blood and wants more. So he wants more interaction. However, he does give Kyle, whether you can trust it or not, more information, sort of, about what's going on with him. He calls him Outcast, which is the first time we've heard that word.
actually, no, they said that in the pilot.
Okay. Well,
Josh called him that too.
okay. Well, the first time I guess that we've been given a little bit more of a definition about what that means. So he basically talks about, he builds a little bit of a narrative around Kyle and an explanation about why he is the way he is. Says, oh, one of your parents took off early. It's hard for you to keep friends. Nobody's quite comfortable around you. And, Kyle wants to know more, and that's pretty much all he gets from
Yeah.
from Blake.
Unfortunately, he doesn't get a whole bunch there, and he basically says, "Hey, I can." The part where he's like, "Hey, just let me put the word out, and we'll leave you alone eventually." I was like, "Oh
Right.
my God, are you actually going to believe that?" But then he also says, "No, that was never going to be the case." Eventually, later on in the episode.
Right. And then you see also Blake toying, with Luke, and Luke comes pretty close to killing him. And in some ways you feel like that would be a triumph, and that's what part of the end game for Blake is.
Does that make sense? I mean, yeah. Again, we still don't really understand the context of what the demons are up to, what their goals are, and if you're right, and in that case, he was trying to get Luke to kill him. It seems like he was,
Yeah.
because he even goads him after he doesn't kill him. He's like, "Pussy," and why couldn't you go through with it? Doesn't make a
Well,
whole
maybe
lot of
he's
sense.
trying to escape and get into another body. We don't know all of this yet.
Right.
And in the other storyline, we've got something a little bit, or at least, I don't want to call it more mundane, but at least at face, less supernatural. So we've got the stuff, the development of Mark's character a little bit more, and we see more of his relationship with Megan. And despite my earlier thought that she's maybe becoming possessed. That's not the case. She's just reliving some stuff from her past. And so this guy, Donnie, is in town. And, it's interesting because, I kind of feel like one of the things that fuels some of the storyline of this show is secrets. And so you would think that she might talk to her husband about this, but maybe it's just so damaging and horrible that she doesn't feel like she can do it. But, she goes through this whole thing where she goes to the hotel where she had seen Donnie, kind of talks her way into getting his room, breaks into the room. I don't know what she was going to accomplish doing that.
Yeah,
but
what was she looking for?
It's kind of weird. Like, what is your end game there? And then sees that he's been basically stalking her and her husband and her family on Facebook, which is terrifying. And that's kind of, I'm not quite sure what I think about that, but at least you're at least building this narrative where there's a backstory here that she's going to need to resolve. And I kept expecting, and they're sort of intersplicing these scenes between her looking in his room and all that, and Mark going out to process the creepy trailer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What did you think? I kept thinking something was going to happen, and eventually this weird wolf shows up from nowhere.
Yeah, and then he chases it off. It's actually kind of like a non-event. They I don't know. They had to show him finding evidence, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though we're saying a lot of things positive things about this episode, this one for me, it was a little bit slower, or
it was.
It didn't hold my interest 100%. But they did cover some very important ground. Like they introduced these plot points. They introduced the storyline of Donnie for Megan, and they moved the cabin story along. And we got the information about Blake and Kyle. It's just that for some reason there were parts of this episode that I was kind of like, okay,
yeah, they were a little
next?
draggy. But I also think that they were trying to establish, at least give you a sense of why Megan might be with Mark, so you could actually see them together as a normal couple. And you did. I mean, they did some good, bonding moments where they're trying to have sex in the morning with their kid banging on the door and stuff like that. And you kind of see that piece of it, which other, and I think, you were saying before in terms of the development of the Mark character, you kind of want to believe that he's not a bad guy, and let's hope that that's where they go with it, but he could easily be a total dick. You never know. But here I feel like they were showing him more as like a normal husband figure.
Yeah. Well, when we get to episode 4, we get a whole bunch of stuff about
yeah,
him.
we do. Yeah, we do.
We're still processing.
Yep. So sorry, because I watched these back to back, but did Donnie see them at dinner in this episode, or was it next episode?
That was the next episode.
Next episode. Okay, so we'll
Should we just jump over there?
Yeah, let's just jump.
So, Wrath Unseen. This is the one that Kirkman wrote. And I don't know if it's just my imagination, but this script, everything about this episode felt alive and dynamic and tight. And I think
yeah, it did.
I think Kirkman is I don't know. I think he's well deserved in his success.
I think he's a really great storyteller.
Yeah.
And the storytelling in this was great. It didn't have some of the dragginess I felt like episode 3 did, even though it did lay down some important groundwork. But this, to me, everything fit in with each other. Oh, I guess we should say, sorry, before we jump into this, Norville, the last part of the last episode is that Kyle comes home. He tries to get a hold of his neighbor Norville, can't rouse him, and ends up going in and finds that he's committed suicide. So that leads into the opener of this episode, which is Norville's funeral.
Well, we know that he hasn't committed suicide because another part of that episode 3 were some cutscenes of Brent Spiner shaving with a straight razor and just getting ready and then hawking up a black loogie. So we get to see that he does actually have some sort of demonic phlegm, or I don't know what the hell's going on.
Something's going on.
So, but yeah, the same straight razor that he was shaving with is the the method by which Norville has slit his wrists, and so it appears that he has committed suicide, but the audience is in on it.
Yep. Well, and also, I mean, this is a character which, again, storytelling-wise, this is a great piece because Norville we didn't really see that much of him, but you felt better knowing that he was there supporting Kyle.
Yeah,
That Kyle had an ally and somebody that maybe didn't know everything that was going on in that house, but knew enough that he was going to believe things that Kyle said and was willing to be the closest thing I would say that Kyle has to a friend.
Right.
So it's interesting how strongly I felt about his being taken out of this so quickly, but I did feel strongly about it. So I think that that's a testament to how they're building these characters.
Well, yeah, the only interactions we saw with him were him trying to be a good guy, like
True.
lending Kyle his car, inviting him over for dinner, apologizing to him for not intervening in the years of or however long he was getting beaten. And then when in episode 2, when Kyle brought his mom back from the home, Norville's like, "What? Hey, is everything okay? What are you guys up? What are you doing in there?" And Kyle's kind of mean to him, but Norville continues to be, as far as we know, a good dude to him. So yeah, they definitely, even just in a short time, had managed to make his character, who's super peripheral, you're still sad when he dies for sure.
Right.
And it's even sadder when nobody goes to his funeral.
Except for Kyle and the Reverend and eventually Brent Spiner, which is very much I felt like that was very much a Brent Spiner showing up and saying "fuck you." It was a little bit of an intro, but it was also a little bit of a "fuck you." And I mean, my sense is that Kyle knew something was up, but he just doesn't know what yet.
Did he shake hands with him?
Yes, so that was the interesting thing. And Kyle's kind of like, I don't know, it's a little bit, you kind of think there's going to be more of a reaction, but there isn't.
Because we still, like we keep coming back to, the rules are unclear. So every other demon he's touched has had a visceral reaction. And Brent Spiner, who I'm pretty sure is possessed, just kind of shakes his hand and moves on.
We see a little bit more of the Demon of the Week here with the Reverend, a little bit of his flashback. Uma, who's one of the churchgoers, she's the character actor we talked about before. She was in Twin Peaks.
She's the one who talked about saucy language after his sermon.
Yes, I think her character's name is Uma, maybe, or something like that.
That might be because she has a German sign on the door. They might be messing up the word Oma, which means grandma.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's how they called her. They called her Uma on the show, but I have a feeling it might be like West Virginia for the German.
But anyway, she was on...
Mildred. I think her name's Mildred, right?
Maybe. So in any case, she's there. And look, she's like a great character actor, but one thing about this actor that is always the case is that she's very saucy, but she also seems a little bit evil all the time, at least in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
I mean, there's always something about her that's a little off, so I think she plays the line on this like really well. And you're definitely, for good reason, getting the same kind of vibe off of her that you get off of Blake, which is and it turns out that she is somebody that the Reverend has supposedly... he performed an exorcism on her. Mm-hmm. And there's this whole weird little thing where he talks about all these keepsakes that he has, and they're mementos of people that he's helped, I guess.
Yeah.
And so this one is specifically, we see flashbacks to this particular character, tied to a bed, and him supposedly performing an exorcism on her.
Yeah. What do you think about his lady friend? We saw them getting introduced and her like trying to get him to come over for dinner in episode 2, and then she's at his place and he's telling her about his victories, as he calls them, his shelf of tchotchkes, and she's really into him.
My bets are on the fact that she is a possessed person.
Because everybody in this town is.
Everybody in this town is, but also she's too big of an actor for that not to be the case. And she also often plays these somewhat complicated characters that think they're doing right but often do wrong. I don't know if you recall her. She was on The West Wing as sort of the Alan Alda character's right-wing campaign manager. She's very much like on that show, she plays a little bit of a, she believes her things, but she's very, her principles, but they're not always the principles that, I don't know, well, at least liberals believe in. Okay. I shouldn't say that's evil, but her way of doing things is not necessarily always ethical. So, and I'm not saying that this character is the same, but she's a little too good to be true, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
And she
She's
seems to
too
be,
into this, curmudgeonly, cursing and smoking reverend.
and she keeps asking him a lot of questions and like trying to pull out a lot of things. And to me, she's also trying to create. She's trying to create a bond with him and put him at ease a little too much. It's just a little too sugar and spice to be real. So I'm sure we'll be seeing her head spin later on.
Well, just in a couple of scenes together now, yeah, you're starting to think of her as an ally of his, and just like Norville was of
Right.
Kyle's, but not that those two characters obviously necessarily have parallel arcs, but we'll see.
Right.
Yeah, so Mildred is definitely the demon of the monster of the week, but it doesn't seem like she's going away either. So actually, to call Blake that and to call her that, isn't quite right, because they're probably going to still be in the show, at least for the short term.
Maybe they're serial monsters. I don't know.
Serial monster.
Special guest monsters.
We've also got Megan and Mark going out on a date night, which is, they have some nice dialogue beforehand where she's like, all I have is A game, and it's like a moment of levity. But then obviously their dinner gets interrupted by Donnie, and she kind of goes like a bunny in a field with a predator nearby, and just it's painfully awkward is the wrong word, but when you think about if he's if he's a rapist, or someone who had sexually assaulted her, just coming up the way he did and talking to her husband, and and there's no acknowledgement of the fact that she has basically shut down entirely.
Right.
And it was a crazy scene.
It's a crazy scene, and it also, you see her husband trying to recover, and he clearly knows something's up. But I will tell you, if my significant other was behaving in this way, I'd be really worried.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, we need to get out of here and figure out what's going on. So it was interesting that he didn't press her a little bit more. I mean, she acknowledges that he was a total jerk and somebody she wished she never seen again, but they don't go into more detail than that. But clearly her reaction is a lot more than that, you can tell. So that was kind of an interesting take on their relationship, or a window into their relationship.
Yeah, this episode, I feel like one of the underlying, well, we have a few strings, as we always do in these, but between her and Mark, it's about what they're not telling each other,
right.
Obviously. Right? In the beginning, she's not telling Mark that she has this history, and by the end, he's not telling her something. And then with the Reverend and Kyle, they're talking about pride as his favorite. Eventually, they talk about pride and not seeing the things that are right in front of you because you don't want to believe them. But the other storyline in this episode is a really cool one about Chief Giles, and we start off with him at a barbecue with his wife and the fire chief, who we haven't seen since the pilot.
Right.
And his wife, and right away we know that his wife is a zombie. Oh, not a zombie. Sorry, force of habit. is a demon, because A, she's not a vegetarian anymore, and B, the dog hates her.
Yep.
You and I feel like all the audience members know this, also based on some shots of her face looking
weird,
right? I don't think the fire chief is.
No, unclear.
But that makes the rest of this episode, like, there's a very big question mark around this storyline at this point, especially as you finish up this episode.
Well, and you with the dialogue in this, so one thing we did not talk about in terms of the evidence that Mark had collected, one of the things that he found was a watch at the burnt out trailer, and within the first few minutes of this dinner scene, we see Chief Giles, and then it's like, Chief Giles is not trying to cover up, he's trying to figure things out, and it turns out that the watch actually belongs to the fire chief, and Chief Giles lies about it, about where it came from. Says like somebody just dropped it off, and it's almost like he's trying to see the reaction of the chief, and he was
pushing so lightly that I thought he was just sweeping it under the rug.
I didn't get that. I thought he was trying to play and see what happens, and then was very heartened to see what his next act was, basically. Which is to, he tells his wife he's going on a camp, or on like a hunting expedition, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And they actually have like a funny little banter where she's just like, yeah, you gotta like Make sure you're not mistaken by these crazy people out there.
Crackers.
Yeah. And then what he's actually doing is going to scope out the crazy little trailer.
Yeah, and that was obviously that kind of puts our fears at rest that he's part of the axis of evil on the show. He's doing police work, which we haven't really seen him do much of yet, to be honest. He's mostly been cutting deals with priests and hiding evidence, because that was what he did basically when Mark comes back with his bags and boxes of evidence. He's like, yeah, just put it in my office and I'll take it from here. And we're like, oh man. At least that was in episode 3.
Right. Well, and also I have to say, I thought the dog was freaking out at the fire chief, not the wife. I felt like that was a little bit of a red herring.
Oh, I couldn't. I feel like the camera work at least made it seem like it was her to me.
We'll see what happens, but we'll talk a little bit about that a little later on. And then the big piece of this, which I thought was some of the most, like, in terms of the storytelling, is with Kyle and the Reverend and going to Mildred's house. Because they do this over the course of the episode, and you kind of see the first interaction. And so the Reverend is propping this up as somebody that he has saved, and they're going to visit because he said something like, you have to keep the demons out. So you have to basically perform maintenance is kind of the implication I was getting. Is that what you got to?
Yeah, essentially he's taking her groceries to just keep
checking in on her, basically.
Yeah.
And we also get a sneak peek into how other people are interacting with her. Her daughter is there at the house and basically said she's not the same person. She called my daughter a whore. I really don't know how much more of this I can take. And the Reverend's just like, oh, be patient, all this other stuff, which you're like, okay, all the stuff that she's describing really doesn't sound like anything has been fixed here. And Kyle also looks a little bit sideways at that, and his interaction with Mildred is the same as other possessed people have had, which is that his touch causes her pain.
She talks about knowing who he is. She's like, what happened with your marriage? What happened with that Josh kid? Some of this she could know through gossip, but
right.
Also, yeah, it's actually a real subtle line between, oh, is she she doing the same thing where she says, I know who you are, and I'm going to say things to you that make you feel bad about yourself? Or is she just like a mean old lady? It took a minute to figure it out for me.
Right. Grace Zabriskie is the actress, and she's really... she's just really great. She walks this line so well so that you're questioning, and there's always this weird trust thing where, like, is it a possession? Is it not? Is it just an angry, gossipy, small-minded old woman? And then once he touches her, and you definitely see like a look that we've seen before toward Kyle, and he's pretty convinced, but even then has a hard time convincing the Reverend, because the Reverend doesn't want to believe that his exorcism has not worked.
Right.
And he says something like, this woman comes to my church every day. I've spent all this time. I would know whether this was somebody possessed. And Kyle's like, yeah, maybe not. So, that's interesting. And then when the Reverend has to go back and kind of prove to himself, or feels like he needs more evidence, his whole conversation with Mildred is amazing.
Yeah, the back and forth about playing games, her little lunge at him.
Mm-hmm. And then and he even second guesses it, like, did I just see that?
Right.
And the audience does too. It's this really subtle thing, which I think the writing in this and the dialogue is so clever.
And her acting.
Yeah, her acting is awesome.
But yeah, and the editing, just like putting in that flashback as she's making a little face, and yeah, it's fantastic. It's good stuff.
Right. So we've got that going on, and basically the big sort of fill in here, or the piece of the storyline that is filled in here, is that all these people that the Reverend thinks he has helped are probably still running around possessed in the town. So that's unhappy news.
And actually, probably the biggest reveal and it's not till the very end of the episode, but the biggest reveal there is that he also must have performed an exorcism on Allison, Kyle's
Yes,
wife.
Kyle's wife. And
Which is
that's
kind
and Kyle immediately wants to go and check on her because now he's like, his daughter is, of course, still with his wife. So, this is horrible news. So,
yeah, but so that's jumping too far ahead because we also have a lot of the Megan and Mark story, which is one of the central stories here. It's hard to tell which story they're giving the most emphasis to. Obviously, the Chief Giles story is just a few scenes, so that one seems kind of peripheral. But the Mark and Megan one and Donnie is definitely big. Mark in this episode early on is seems like he's really trying hard to pull Megan out of her shell. She's kind of a little bit, they're not talking, as we said. So he's making an effort. But Megan is having, these flashbacks. She's seeing how how the assault went, which happened in her house. And it seems like the guy isn't an intruder. And it turns out later that he's her foster brother.
yep.
Just as Kyle is, I guess, or adopted brother.
Right.
So that's super messed up, and we see her getting her gun, and or at least, yeah, finding the gun, and then we have an interesting scene with Mark and Kyle. Well, also we had Kyle and Donnie actually met up after
Right.
Donnie went to the restaurant.
Right,
And
because
Kyle gets his ass-
Kyle sees him at a bar by happenstance and just freaks out. So you clearly know that Kyle is very much aware of what happened to Megan.
Yeah.
And tries to beat him up unsuccessfully. They get kicked out of a bar, but nothing. He's not successful in it, but later on gets picked up by Mark because Mark's a smarter guy than I think lots of people maybe give him credit for. And he knows something is up with Megan, and he must be really worried because he really does not like Kyle.
Yeah.
So for
That's
him
sweet.
to seek Kyle out is
Yeah.
saying a lot about how he must care about Megan.
Yeah. Well, Megan has also told him that Kyle used to run interference, even though he says, when he's talking to Kyle, he's like, I didn't believe that. I thought she was just trying to talk you up to me. But he's under the impression that Megan has shared more details about her assault when she was a kid with Kyle. And I assume that's why he's going to him, even though he hates him.
Right. But still, even for him to do that, that's a big step up since he couldn't even stand to have Kyle in the house to have dinner. So there's that. And, Kyle gives a little bit of information that basically when he figured out what was happening, he would sleep on the floor to protect her, which didn't seem to do a ton of good.
It's crazy that Kyle doesn't actually volunteer any information other than that detail. But Mark just asks, he's like, is that him? And even though Kyle doesn't respond, he's like, oh my God, he figures it out. Yeah, so
Yep.
It's cool. It's like Mark is actually pretty intuitive. But now there's a concern that he is going to do something stupid. And there's also a concern that Megan's going to do something stupid because she's like got this gun and she does do something stupid.
And she's hiding stuff. She's hiding stuff all the time. So, yeah, and she even kind of blows Kyle off when Kyle's like, hey, I saw this guy in town, and he's all worried about her, and she's like, I'm fine. She just kind of like...
Buys glasses.
Yeah, she buys glasses, which is weird, but...
Yeah. So we got...
Oh, but she goes to confront Donnie, and you're definitely worried for her, even though she has a gun on her. And she basically tells him to get out of town, which it looks like ultimately... And he says all this stuff like, oh, think about how it ruined my life, too. And it's like, yeah, dude, that's not really how it works.
He's an unrepentant, total dick.
Yeah.
So we've got that figured out. But yeah, this scene with her when she goes to his hotel room...
Really weird.
He is between her and the door.
Yeah, not good thing.
He's not acting aggressive physically, but his language clearly is like unrepentant, like I said. But she's poking the bear in this scene. She's like, "You are a pathetic person. You mean nothing to me."
I thought she was trying to force him to act so that she could shoot him or something like that.
Yeah, maybe, but they're standing not far away from each other.
Yeah.
And the scene ends without us seeing how it resolves. Like we don't see how she gets out of there.
Right. And then, the last part or one of the last parts of this is that we see Donnie leaving town, but then getting pulled over by Mark. And once again, we have the little off-camera work. We don't really see exactly what happens, but we do eventually see from the viewpoint of Mark's dashboard cam in his police cruiser that he has pulled Donnie into the bushes and is beating the tar out of him. And we see a little bit of the aftermath because he's like back at the house, like washing blood off of his hands. So we don't really know if Donnie is still alive.
I half expected Megan's body to be in his trunk, honestly, when Mark pulled him over.
Well, who knows?
But then she's back at the house, and she
yeah.
and Mark finally kind of, they almost open up to each other, but then they end with the exchange of what was your day like, the usual.
Yeah. And then there's also the exchange between the other piece at the house. I mean, they do a good job at sort of intersplicing all this, as we said, but Chief Giles calls Mark and basically says, "Oh, remember when I told you to sit on all that evidence? Well, you need to send it to the lab." And we see that he has witnessed the fire chief, Ogden, burning down the cabin. So it's still questionable. Is it Ogden's wife? Is it Ogden himself? Like, is he covering for his wife, or is it him? Yeah. Hard to tell, but Chief Giles knows something is up enough that he's, all right, we got to do something about this.
It doesn't, either way, like they seem to be operating. At the barbecue, they were both talking. So if either of them is possessed, it's that one of those high-level types like Blake.
Yep.
But, how could they, I don't know. We'll have to find out how they're even operating together. If one of them is and the other one isn't, how is that working? And if he's covering for her. Because the fingernail that they found, that Mark found at the scene, looked like to me like a lady's fingernail.
It did. So that's tough to, So we'll see what happens there. But again, I'm really enjoying this. I especially enjoy this episode. I thought it was just a very well done job in terms of directing. I thought the acting was incredible. I thought the script was and the dialogue was great. So kudos to Kirkman. I'm still enjoying this, and I still want to know more. And I'm not getting tired of it yet, but I do think that they have to start moving the storyline along a little bit.
As far as some of these unresolved issues?
Yeah, I don't want it to stagnate, and I'm worried that that's what's going to happen. But so far, to me, it's still going at a pretty good pace, and I'm still intrigued by it, even though it's still hard for me to watch. To each his own. I admit that this is a struggle for me from putting sort of, nightmare scenarios into my head, but what is are you still feeling like if we weren't reviewing this, would you want to watch more?
Yeah. During the day,
Yeah, exactly. I can't watch this at night. No way. So
actually, I did watch I watched episode 4, in the witching hour.
Ooh.
Around midnight, and it's just a good show. So it's not like, and it's not like a jump scare sort of show. It's unsettling, It's
unsettling, and I mean, I think one of the things that they're building up in this town is like, who can you trust? Like who is a character that you can trust that is solid? Who is surrounding our main characters and the storyline? Because I think ultimately we're going to figure out it's probably no one, but and that's a very unsettling thought. So. Mm-hmm. And I think that they're building that unsettling storyline with some of the things that they're doing. I keep going back to Uma, whatever, Mildred, whatever her name is, and it's this really disconcerting feeling when she's talking to the Reverend and to Kyle, and she's also very manipulative in that she, after her meeting with the Reverend in talking about game playing and things like that, she tells her daughter that he needs to stay away from her. So she manages, I think she kind of knows what's coming, that the Reverend's going to come back and basically is going to bar his access by putting her daughter up as like a stumbling block. So she's clearly, she's a cunning demon, and it's super creepy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, depending on how much these creatures actually can control themselves, her daughter was on the edge of not wanting to deal with her anymore anyway. So they're not that good at manipulating people if everybody hates them, Well,
but again, she must have shown some side to her daughter so that her daughter was now taking her side.
Right.
So it's sort of like if they can get away with it, they do. But maybe it's just they're showing their true colors sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just hard to understand what their motives are.
Right.
Like,
I mean, well, maybe
why
it's...
would she want to make her daughter dislike her?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is to get these characters that would ultimately be good, if you want to put it into terms such as black and white like that, into doing evil. So I think that's why Blake is egging Luke on. And, you know, it's a little bit of the Seven logic, you know, where Brad Pitt resists Kevin Spacey's invitation to kill him.
Right.
So that's like, I think that's where we're going here. But more remains to be seen. I still would like to see more, so I'd like to hear what others have to say about this. Love to hear your thoughts on the next two if you continued on. So shoot us an email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or send us a tweet. Reanimatedpcast is our handle there. And anything else to add, Stuart?
No, that was it. Good episodes, good show, and we will watch with great anticipation.
I'm hoping for more Kirkman episodes, I have to tell you. But I'm sure they're going to be teasing us on that. So, but until next time, ciao.
Alrighty, bye-bye.